want to talk about James Somerton's Measured Response video and how he tried to weaponize his epilepsy. I will therefore call this video an epileptic response, simply because it feels like he came into my house and shat all over the carpet. However, before I continue to articulate my anger, I want to clarify that when I speak about disability and people with disabilities, I am including people with chronic illnesses and medical conditions, as well as people who have not yet received an official diagnosis. It also includes people with mental health conditions, and of course people who do not qualify for the disability status in their respective country. In case you have not watched Somerton's Measured Response video, released February 26, 2024, the 43-minute video is a justification attempt disguised as a partial apology. To me, a lot of the reasons and talking points ring hollow, but also I am not among the creators who had the content stolen or plagiarized from, so I can only offer the perspective of a past occasional viewer. My personal problem lies with a specific section within Somerton's video, starting at about the 12-minute mark.
This meant putting out more videos, which meant I had to take over more of the writing duties. But since filming, editing, usually doing multiple edits because of YouTube copyright issues, as well as managing the channel and dealing with my mom's recent cancer diagnosis, all of that was already taking up so much of my time and attention. This led to a lot of copy and pasting blocks of text into scripts. My intention at the time was to use these as a jumping off point once Nick and I sat down to edit the script, because that's what we would do.
This part of the workflow most of us can follow. You do research and you choose a way to organize your sources, be it by bookmarking, color coding, keeping all 120 tabs with your sources open in your browser. I see you. You have a lot of tabs open right now on your web browser, and all of them are relevant to whatever you are writing right now. You pray your session will never crash on you, and you have no way to reliably recover your tabs if your browser decides to crash. Please get a browser plugin to save your open tab sessions. Let's say you settle for copy-pasting articles into a Word doc as you do your research. This is where you would add a link or reference to the source, right?
I would sort of put in my parts, Nick would put in his parts, and then we would sit down at a table, read through the whole script, and kind of try and make it seem cohesive. But, and here's something I'm sure a lot of people will call a bullshit excuse, I have memory issues because of a head injury from when I was a child. They're actually getting worse. I've talked about it on streams and in videos, so yes, it is real. But some people will call it a bullshit excuse anyway. The head injury is actually what led to me having epilepsy, which is why I can't work in any job that involves physical labor. Employers can't get insurance for me to lift things or operate vehicles and stuff like that. I actually did marketing for a restaurant group for a little while, but got let go when they found out that I was epileptic because, at least according to them, I couldn't be insured to be in the kitchens where I needed to be to film videos and take photos and stuff like that. But anyway, when it came to editing the scripts, I couldn't remember what I'd written and what had been copy-pasted. We should have just chucked out everything that I had put into the script and filled them in with wholly original thoughts. Or I should have been taking notes on where things came from so that we could at least cite them in the videos, if nothing else. But I never did that. According to my therapist, my not thinking to do that probably stems from my recently diagnosed ADHD, but I don't know if I'm willing to say that, really. Maybe it was, or maybe it was just plain laziness. Maybe I thought that this was somewhere that I could cut a corner because I was torn in so many other directions. Honestly, I can't remember, like I said. Memory issues. But yes, we should have just thrown out my contributions to the scripts and filled them in with original writing.
This is the part of the video that gained my undivided attention. For a moment, for a very good few minutes actually, James had my sympathy. Especially when he talks about being fired due to his employer learning about his epilepsy. When he was mentioning his memory issues and his epilepsy, there was this part of me that had to sit down and check myself and my judgment, whether he deserved all this rage and retaliation. Am I being ableist right now and blaming someone for mistakes that happened because of their disability and that they could not have prevented? Because, samesies buddy, I am diagnosed with epilepsy and I have memory issues on occasion, and I would not be surprised if I had some other type of neurodiversity going on, but who is to say? So here's this YouTuber who got caught plagiarizing the shit out of other creators, explaining away his deeds as a consequence of his ADHD, epilepsy and memory issues, enabling each other in the worst way possible. I do not doubt any of his stated medical diagnoses, I do not doubt him having epilepsy, struggling with memory issues, nor do I doubt his ADHD. Somerton has mentioned his epilepsy before in Patreon exclusive podcasts. They are linked in the video description below. Somerton's description of his epilepsy and seizures comes across as highly authentic to me. In fact, I had to stop reading because they remind me a lot of my own experiences in the most uncomfortable way. I find it appalling for people to doubt him on this diagnosis. I usually am happy about invisible disabilities being made visible through representation, but I'm glad he never made a big deal of his medical history, because I do not know how I would have felt if the apparently only gay YouTuber was also the poster boy for epilepsy representation. Hearing Somerton attribute his poor business practices to his epilepsy and memory issues feels like a slap in the face. When I openly address my epilepsy with new people, there's a good chance that I am the first person they meet who has epilepsy or who is willing to talk about it. Sometimes you will have people say they had someone in their class with epilepsy, or the seizure looked freaky. But the general knowledge about epilepsy is fairly slim. Did you know, for example, there's more than one type of seizures? That some seizures aren't even affecting the entire body, or that some seizures will not display convulsions? Read up on it, it's actually quite interesting. This is also the obligatory moment where I implore you to learn about seizure first aid. All resources and references will be put in the video description. When Somerton attributes his plagiarism to his epilepsy and memory issues in front of the big audience on YouTube that he has, especially with the current scandal, he is confirming the bias that people with disabilities cannot be trusted with any type of work. It's also a terrible first impression of meeting somebody who is open about their epilepsy. When plagiarism is justified by mentioning medical conditions, you are telling your audience that disabled people are bad people and that they cannot help being bad people because of their disabilities. Instead of sometimes somebody is a bad person who also happens to be disabled. Nobody is proud to admit that they have a bad memory, especially when it causes regular issues in your day-to-day life. Memory issues are terrible, they affect your way of learning, writing, creating, and socializing. Imagine being part of a conversation only to not be able to remember the past 15 minutes of what has just been said because your brain simply won't let you. This is nothing to laugh about. Memory problems make people vulnerable to gaslighting because you will say things and not remember having said them. Memory issues, however, will not cause you to repeatedly copy-paste entire books or articles into your YouTube script document and then cause you to just take the smart writing that appeared magically in your document as your own. That's not how it works. I can see some accidental plagiarism happening this way. For example, you paste a quote into your document, then you go out to paste your source, but just that moment you just kind of forget and continue on to the next part of your work. I also want to mention that most writing software has a version history feature. You can track your progress and changes throughout, and this way you can see how much progress was made by whom and how much was written within what time frame. If large chunks of text magically appear in your history, maybe it would be wise to check for sources you forgot to mention. What happened with Somerton's work is consistent and systematic, spanning over multiple years of a YouTube career with no actual change in sight. I do not count using based on as changing your academic integrity to the better. Nothing about that workflow seems very based to me. Do people still say based? If you write an essay and hand it in the next day and you happen to have plagiarized because you did not notice, okay, I can see that being a possibility. But when you make a video, you have to read that script again, and based on my current terrible experience of recording this script, you have to read it more than once. That sounded weird. Let me redo this. You have to read it more than once. Even if you don't remember writing these things, you would probably be likely to recognize your own writing style. I keep finding scripts on my drive I don't remember writing, but I recognize my very specific way to butcher the English language. And apparently my proofreaders do too, as they have pointed out continuously while I was writing the script. Thanks for that. I am pretty sure with the money he earned via his Patreon, he could have possibly even hired an occasional proofreader to peer review and check for plagiarism. Not to mention, his reactions to the proven plagiarism really leave a sour taste in my mouth about this line of reasoning. I also find it odd that he blames the urge to chase the algorithm for rushing out videos, despite the fact he kept complaining about being demonetized or oppressed by the big YouTube corporation and thus relying on sponsorships and Patreon. Why chase the algorithm if the platform is supposedly so biased against LGBTQ+ related videos? Somerton's Patreons surely would have understood that you have to take your time in making your next video. I do not know about how flexible sponsorship contracts are, but I'd argue it must be possible to push the occasional deadline by communicating with the sponsorship partner. And if you really rely on putting out constant videos in order to make ends meet, then maybe don't make long-form video essays that require a lot of research. Try to sprinkle in some short-format, less research-heavy things. I don't have a business major, but that seems kind of sensible to me. If you can't finance your livelihood with a single focus area of content or production, then you need to find a different area that makes the money to finance what you are passionate about. But it seems like Somerton has not even been that passionate about video essays anyways, so I don't know, man, bad business move. But also, as of February 2024, I'm not a monetized YouTuber, so what do I know? I'll tell you what I know. Memory issues typically affect the way you work. You learn to double and triple check everything. You create systems, for example color coding and bookmarking techniques, to prevent plagiarism and mistakes. What makes it worse to me, Somerton had a co-writer. Using his own disabilities as an excuse makes me question not just Somerton's work ethics, but Nick's as well. Why wouldn't you proofread your friends' and boss's writing? Did Somerton not say, "Hey Nick, I struggle with memory issues. Can you check my shit for plagiarism or parts I forgot to quote?" Nick was hired to help with the checks and balances, weren't they? So why have they not been applied to Somerton's specific situation? Somerton says he wanted to help Nick by hiring them as a writer. He says he wants to keep the videos Nick supposedly wrote alone online. But Somerton has now essentially said that Nick cannot be trusted in a professional writer's setting. I don't see how Somerton is supporting his former friend and co-writer by throwing their skills as a writer and editor under the bus like this. Nick's supposed inability to notice such blatant theft is being implied by this statement. This is not the type of endorsement any creative wants to have on their resume. In using his disability as a shield, Somerton poorly deflects the responsibility for his deeds, and he degrades everyone with epilepsy, memory issues, and ADHD. He is giving malicious reasons to ableist practices in academic and research-related fields. In addition to the bad rhetoric in Somerton's video, I have seen commentary that questions or refuses to believe Somerton on his epilepsy and memory issues, and that is horrible as well. I think it is also worth mentioning that epilepsy does not always look the way it is being portrayed in the movies. I recommend, for example, reading up on Lil Wayne's history with the condition. Link in the description below. I feel as if I'm gatekeeping the diagnosis, as if I'm trying to explain to someone that their disability doesn't work that way, and in any other situation that would make me an absolute ableist piece of shit. Yet, here I am, playing Paralympic morality table tennis. Epilepsy, brain damage, memory issues, and ADHD do not justify malpractice and a display of bad character. People with neurological conditions have a hard time already to being taken seriously when talking about their struggles. Not being believed when talking about the struggles that come with epilepsy is one of the very common things I hear about within epilepsy community spaces. People do not receive diagnosis or medication. We are being excluded, shamed, made fun of, belittled, and mocked for things that are out of our control. We are compared to demonic possession, assumed to be oracles of the future, and a target for eugenicist practices. Did you know? The last state in the USA to finally allow marriage for people for epilepsy and to get rid of the laws prohibiting it, got rid of these laws in 1980. The UK got rid of this law in 1970. Sterilization has been not just a tool used by the Nazis on epileptic people, other countries have done it as well. These conditions come with a lot of stigma, and as Somerton has himself told, ableism in the workplace. I actually had to check if that anecdote is plagiarized, because a friend of mine was joking about that being the case. To my knowledge, it is not plagiarized, but you will find quite a few articles that talk about workplace discrimination towards people with epilepsy. I am inclined to believe him. This happened because anti-discrimination laws do not actually stop all employers from discrimination against disabled people. Seizure activity makes other people very uncomfortable, and I will not rule out that this discomfort will make an employer invent a reason to let you go. Epilepsy is one of the most common neurological disorders, and yet patients are shamed into invisibility. It would have been great to have a queer YouTuber with epilepsy as a representative of the community, but quite frankly, I am willing to revoke Somerton's seizure joke license. Somerton mentioning his diagnosis in this way has paved the path for a bunch of brain injury and brain damage jokes. In my eyes, not funny. I can kinda grin about them, assuming the person making the joke just wants to point out his ridiculous line of logic. These jokes and memes just feel as if they are dismissing the very real fact that a head injury can cause you permanent brain damage. Or epilepsy. Now, for all the very skeptical people, what if Somerton is lying about all this? So what? So what if he's lying about his medical history or severity of his symptoms? Personally, I think it doesn't matter if they are lies, half-truths, or over-dramatized information, or just plain facts. If he is in fact lying, I have the same amount of sympathy left as I have for people who fake seizures, i.e. none. If he is telling half-truths or exaggerating his tales for dramatic effect and sympathy, I hope he will find a healthier way in assessing his relationship with his diagnosis. If he is telling the truth, sucks to be him right now, doesn't justify any of the plagiarism and misinformation. No matter how you choose to interpret his statement, he is harming people with disabilities. If you happen to have jumped immediately to call him out on having mentioned his epilepsy and memory issues, and if you have decided to immediately call these complete bullshit, please ask yourself why you did this. Where do you draw the line at which you begin to question a person's experience with discrimination and disability? The focus on the validity of Somerton's reasons for why he was let go, or whether his disabilities are as severe as he claims, comes across as misguided and is more of a red flag for other people with disabilities who see how people choose to engage with this video. Epilepsy doesn't make you a tragic backstory hero, it just makes you a person with epilepsy. And people with epilepsy can also be assholes. You do not have to question the diagnosis or possible mistreatment in the workplace in order to criticize James Somerton's immeasured response. TLDR, Epilepsy and memory issues do not make you systematically plagiarize. Please do not blame your conditions for your bad business practices. In case Mr. Somerton watches this, I wish you all the best moving forward in relation to your health and disabilities. I didn't want to make another epilepsy video, at least not this one, but with all the other things to talk about in Somerton's response, I just wanted to document this perspective for myself and others. Thank you to my proofreaders for checking this script on short notice. This video was made in a collaborative approach. While the main writing has been done by me, it would nowhere be where it is right now without the input of my proofreaders, who, by the way, are also people with disabilities. Imagine if I had actually spent longer than 4 days writing this. Who knows how much additional epilepsy awareness I could have shoehorned into this. As mentioned before, I have linked resources and articles about epilepsy in the video description. Please learn about seizure first aid and encourage people around you to do the same. Thank you for listening. See you soon. I also need to point out that I would love to show you the rest of this speed paint, but I forgot to record the last 4 hours of making this image. So, yeah. About being demonetized or oppressed by the big YouTube corporation and thus relied on sponsorships and Patreon.